Today I will show you how to use the Canon EOS 650D HD DSLR camera. It has an 18 to 135 millimeter lens. I will also show you how to use the wireless lavalier microphones. That means you will not need to actually have a wired microphone hooked up. I will show you how to use the shotgun microphone. The shotgun microphone is primarily what we will use to record the B-roll, so we get good natural sound and ambient sound. In addition to the camera, the wireless microphone, the wired shotgun microphone, I will also show you how to use the Manfrotto tripods with the video head. They're quite heavy and quite big, but they're very, very sturdy and are great for shooting video pieces. So here's the equipment that you can be working with if you want to do a video story. This is kind of a very, very basic but very thorough setup. I'll go over each of these items quickly right now, and then I'll go into them a little bit more detail on how to use the different microphones and how to use the tripod as well. So first of all, make sure that you have your own batteries. We will need some AA and some AAA batteries for the various microphones. This is of course the camera that we're going to work with. It's the same one as before. It's the Canon 650D HD DSLR. This is your battery charger. Make sure that you have your batteries charged, because these cameras eat through batteries very, very quickly. Of course, each one of these does have its own battery in the bottom. You should, if you want to create your own story, shoot your own story, make sure you have 2 of these batteries, because these batteries, once we're on full video mode, they run out within about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So you'll always need a backup battery and make sure that they're all fully charged. Okay. As before, everything's going to be recorded on your SD card, which is right here. And we're going to use the standard lens as before, which is the 18 to 135, the zoom lens. Right. So that's the camera. I'll show you how to use that more in a moment. A few of the other items that we have, first of all, this is called a shotgun microphone. The shotgun microphone is used for when we shoot the B-roll, the action video. That is plugged into the side of the camera, which I'll show you how to use later on. It does have an on-off switch, so make sure that when you use this, you turn this on and off. And what this does, this is called a unidirectional microphone. So the microphone that's built into the camera is called omnidirectional. That means inside of here is a very, very small microphone. It's a terrible microphone, so I would never rely on that. And it captures sound from 360 degrees, so from all around the camera. Which is fine if you want to get good ambient sound, but if you want to get good natural sound, we're going to use these shotgun microphones. And the shotgun microphone basically captures sound from the direction of where the microphone is pointing. So it's going to capture sound from this direction, coming to it this way. All right? It'll capture a little bit over here and a little bit over here, but primarily it's going to capture the sound that's over here in front of the microphone. So again, you'll need to make sure that you turn it on. You do need to provide a battery. The battery's compartment is down here. The little switch you open up, and you put a AAA battery on the bottom side. Okay? This little dial right here, and this little square, you use that to attach it to the camera. So this is called the hot shoe of the camera. That's where you put different accessories like a flash, and that's also where we're going to attach this microphone. You screw it down, and this cable is then plugged into here. Okay? So now we have the microphone, the sound coming this way and into the camera, and it overrides the microphone that is in the camera. So now the microphone that is in the camera is no longer working. Of course, as I said, we need to turn it on. And once it's turned on, now we're going to get sound coming this way and into the camera. All right, so that's one microphone. And again, this is the microphone that we're going to use to shoot the B-roll action sequencing. Dynamic and static action. This is the other microphone that we're going to use, and this is for the A-roll sit-down interview. Several components here. And 2 cables. Okay, so as you'll see, there's a very tiny microphone on the end of this cable. And this is what you're going to clip onto the person's shirt or their jacket. And I'll show you how to do that later on with some volunteer students. We're going to do some practice on how to use this what's called a wireless lavalier microphone. And you have two elements. One is called a transmitter and one is called a receiver. Let's look at the transmitter first. The transmitter has this clip right here, and that you can clip onto the person's belt or onto a jacket. Whereas on the receiver, it also has a clip, but more importantly, it's got this square piece, which was the same as on the bottom of this microphone. Okay? And this square piece is on the receiver, so that's what you will attach to the camera. Same place again. Slide it on, you tighten it up. Okay? Now it's secure. For the transmitter, we're going to take this cable, screw it into the top. Okay. Make sure again that this is going onto the transmitter and that microphone is not going into the receiver. It needs to go into the transmitter. And this, which I'll show you, is how we're going to record the interview. That'll be clipped onto the person. We want to make sure that it's somewhat hidden. Two buttons here on the side. You open this up, and you put your batteries in here, AA batteries. For example, I've got some right here. And a button right here, the on-off button, you push that, and it's going to turn on your transmitter. Close the compartment, and you're ready to go. The same part on the receiver. You also open the compartment here, add two batteries, push, turn it on, close the compartment. So now we're ready to transmit our sound from here wirelessly. It will be sent to here, and then we need to get the sound from here and into the camera. And that's what this other cable is for. That's the shorter and much thicker cable. This cable has two ends. Make sure that you put the end that has the little twisting part. That's the part that you screw in. That is screwed into here. Screw it. Make sure that it's tight. The other end, which doesn't have the screw part, but it's kind of an L, shaped like an L. That part, you know, snap into the microphone part of the camera. Okay, so once we've got that plugged in, this receiver is now going to override the microphone that's in here. So we've got sound coming into the little wireless lavalier. It's going to travel into here. It's going to transmit the sound wirelessly to here, and then we're going to move that sound into the camera. Right? So that's how to use this microphone for the A-roll interview. As I mentioned again, this is for the B-roll action, the shotgun microphone. The other element, which is just as important, this is our tripod. You should shoot all of your shots on the tripod. You shouldn't try to handhold because you're going to have a very, very shaky shot. And here's what the tripod looks like. And again, I will show you basically how it looks now, and I'll go in much more detail later on to show you exactly how it's used. Okay. So tripod has what's called a video head. There's various different components on here. We have the legs that go out at different lengths. I won't show you how to do that now because I need a little bit more room, but when we do our examples later on, when I have some students that are going to help me, we'll show you how to shoot some A-roll interviews and the B-roll action with the tripod, with the camera, and the various microphones. So let's start with a few things concerning the camera setup. as I'm going through each of these steps, I will actually record actual video of how I would do that. So now I want to show you the different ways of setting up the camera that we're going to use. All right, as I mentioned before, this is the Canon 650D. Currently I don't have a microphone on here, but I'll attach one on in a moment. When you were shooting your still photos, you usually just turned it to the on position. Now we're going to change it to the video position. And once we change it to video, you'll notice our back screen is now constantly on. So we always have a constant view of what we're seeing. And that's why it drains the battery very, very quickly. To shoot our video, we're going to do a few menu settings. All right, so let's go to menu. Now that we've got menu, we'll notice that we've got two other things to choose from. When we just are shooting photos, we don't have as many menu items. When we switch to video, we have different menu items, which you'll notice here. And one of them which is called the movie record size. Right? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces over. That's the second icon that is video over. And we have something called movie record size. Now these cameras can shoot what's called high definition video, and they can also shoot standard definition video. High definition would be 1920 by 1080 at 25 frames per second, and it can shoot a continuous clip at 29 minutes and 59 seconds. And this is important to remember if you are shooting an A-roll sit-down interview. Your interview could be more than 30 minutes long. And if your interview becomes more than 30 minutes long, you have to make sure that you stop one recording and you start it again. I'll explain that in a moment. Okay, so movie record size. 25 frames per second. Now we've also got 1920, 1080 at 24 frames per second. Let's not worry about all those things. For our purposes, because we don't need high definition video, we're not shooting this for, let's say, a movie screen. We're just going to shoot this for our own assignment. We could choose 1280 by 720. That's standard definition. That is basically the frame size on your computer at 50 frames per second. All right, so we'll choose this one. And then we'll say OK. Next part. We have something that's called grid display. And the grid display is often helpful for us to try to get things that are in the rule of thirds. And I'll show you what that means again. So now we're going to go to the first video camera. Second from the bottom, grid display. I'm actually going to turn this grid on. And I'll show you what that happens, what that will do now. So now, as you can see, we've got this grid. Okay? There's a grid display here. And that will help us when we want to position somebody on a different part of the frame. Because when we do our A-roll interview, we're not going to have the person sitting in the middle. We're going to have the person sitting either to this side or to this side. And that's why it's often good to have this grid display. So we can position their head basically there, or position their head there. And have them look this way, or position their head there, and have them look that way. And I'll explain that more later on. All right, so let's turn on the grid display. Back to menu. On autofocus method, we're going to keep it on the face and tracking. Okay? The face and tracking. Oh, let's get there again. So what happens is, when we start recording our B-roll action sequences later on, once we start recording by pushing the record button, which is right here, once we push this button, it's going to stay tracking on the person's face that we started recording. So it will follow them around if they're kind of moving around this scene. So it'll always kind of be in focus. That's very, very important for us to have to make sure that our subject always stay in focus. Sound recording. Now this is probably the most important part for us. You probably recognize these things right here. Left level and right level that are bouncing. And if you remember correctly, when we're recording our audio, to get a good audio recording, we need to be bouncing between -6 to -12 decibels. And here we've got the number 12 and we've got 0. So now you can see this internal microphone is already recording my voice as these levels are bouncing, and it's bouncing around -6 to -12, which is exactly what it is that we need. We don't want to be bouncing too high. We don't want to be bouncing too low. Let's look at this again. Sound recording. Okay. Currently it's set at auto. That means the camera is deciding what is the correct level that should be bouncing. Most of the time that's going to be good. If we notice that it's bouncing too high or bouncing too low and it's with auto, we can change that. Push auto and we go to manual. And now when we have manual, we can actually click the second part that says record level, and with that we can now make the recording quieter or louder. So it's the same as when we had for the Zoom H4n digital audio recorder. We can control the audio level. But guaranteed most of the time, if we're using auto, it should be good enough. Okay? You need to monitor this. Now unfortunately these cameras don't work so that we can see these audio levels while we're recording. We need to set these audio levels up before we start recording. And again, I will show you an example later on where we do all this first before we actually start recording an interview or recording the B-roll. Some other things to consider. Let's go back to menu. Q. My recommendation to you is we're doing with white balance. Again, white balance is making sure that we're controlling the light that comes in, that it's the correct color, that it's not too yellow or not too blue. Choose automatic white balance. So let's stay with AWB. Let's not use any of the other settings because we might forget it. Okay? So we'll just stay with automatic white balance. To record a video, to start recording, you push the button right here. Once I push the button, you'll notice that right now, it just says up here 29 minutes, 59 seconds. That means that's the maximum amount of time we can do for one video. Not for the entire recording, we can do many clips, but just one continuous recording is 29 minutes, 59 seconds. As soon as we hit the record button, you notice that this number is now counting up. 1, 2, 3, so it's actually recording. We've got the red button on here. So now we are recording some video and audio at the same time. To stop the recording, just hit the button a second time. Now we've recorded a clip of roughly 15 seconds. If we want to, we can play it back. Push the play button. Play. And this is basically the video that I just recorded. Okay? So you can actually listen back. Now, the audio is not very good. It will record some audio, but there's a small microphone inside of here, but the microphone is very bad. But if you wanted to, if you want to make sure that you are recording some sound, you can always hit play. And then you use this wheel. 1, 2, 3, so it's actually recording. That turns up your audio. Okay? But again, please do not rely on the sound that you hear from this built-in microphone as good sound. Okay? You should importantly, as I mentioned before, very importantly, rely on this as incoming good sound. Look at these levels. Don't rely on what you hear, rely on what you see. Let me explain this again about 29 minutes and 59 seconds. These cameras are built in such a way so that the sensor does not overheat inside the camera. So what it does is has a cutoff at 29 minutes and 59 seconds. So for example, if you are going to have a sit-down interview with somebody, and you're recording an interview, whoever is monitoring the camera, whoever the camera person is, should pay attention to this time right here. Because what could happen is as you're recording the interview, the person that you're talking to is talking and talking and talking, and we're getting closer to this time reaching 29 minutes and 59 seconds, and once it reaches that, the camera will stop recording, and that means you need to hit start recording again. So the best thing for you to do is, the person who's working the camera, make sure that they're paying attention to this number, And once it gets to, say, close to 26, 27 minutes, the next time your interview subject stops talking, just say, hold on a minute, hit stop, and hit start. Then you've got a whole new 30 minutes again for one clip. So again, whoever is working with the camera should pay attention to this number to make sure that it doesn't go over 30 minutes, because once it goes over 30 minutes, the camera will stop recording. All right, some more tips when it comes to shooting your A-roll interview and when it comes to shooting your B-roll action sequencing. Turn your stabilizer off. We do not need it because we're always going to have everything on the tripod, so we don't need the stabilizer. When it comes to shooting your A-roll sit-down interview, I want you to turn your camera from autofocus to manual focus. And I'll explain this later on why we're going to do that. I also want you to shoot, which is much better, turn your command dial to manual. I want you to be in complete control over what it is that you're seeing here on your screen. Okay? And again, as I've told you before, we can control all that by rolling these, which we'll control here. We can also change our ISO here. My recommendation is probably leave it on auto, or maybe don't go above 1600, as I mentioned before. Okay? Currently we're on 32, so let's go down to 16. And since we're on manual, we can now control the aperture. As you can see, as you roll the wheel, this screen gets lighter and darker. That means you have to make sure that you're controlling it to make sure that your light that's coming in is set just right. We're shooting at 125th per second at f5.6. And again, if you want to change your aperture, as before, you push this button right here, and you roll this wheel, and that now changes your aperture. All right? So we've got lots of controls. You've got control over the ISO. My recommendation again, do not go above 1600. Control your shutter speed. And also by pushing this button, by rolling this wheel, you can control your aperture. Okay? And I want you to do everything manual when it comes to shooting your A-roll interview, because what can happen is the scene may change very, very much. With your person sitting there, the light may change a little bit. They may move around a little bit in front of the camera, and every time they move in front of the camera, the light may change a little bit. So then you're going to have your incoming light, if it's set on fully automatic or aperture priority, it may go light and dark, light and dark, light and dark. And we want to control that it always stays on the same aperture and always on the same shutter speed. The reason we're doing manual focus rather than autofocus is for this. We're going to, as I mentioned before, here's our frame that we're going to have. And as we're shooting our frame, our person is never going to sit in the middle. We're going to have the person sitting to this side or to this side. And we're going to have them looking into the frame this way and this way. And I'll explain that more in a little while. If we have the camera on autofocus, it's always going to focus on what's in the middle, and that means it's going to focus on the background and won't focus on the person. Because if the person is sitting off to the side, it's not what's in the middle of the camera. So what you'll need to do is you need to set the camera to manual focus. Set the camera to manual focus. And then you need to hand focus. You'll need to hand focus, and you need to make sure that as you focus, it's going to be absolutely right. And once you've focused, then you leave the camera alone. You don't need to focus anymore because it's in focus.